This is the Life by Design podcast with Angela Weiss, Tuesday, episode 4, When Someone is Not Ready for the Kind of Love You Offer, Understanding Emotional Readiness in Relationships. This is a quiet place to think about the life you're living and the life you are stepping into that is becoming for you. Sometimes the most confusing relationships are the ones that felt the most real in the beginning. You meet someone and something about that connection feels so easy. The conversations flow. You talk late into the night, sometimes for hours, and you feel seen in a way that you haven't in a long time. For a moment, it feels like maybe this is finally the kind of connection you've been hoping for. But then something starts to shift. Communication changes. Consistency fades, plans, they become uncertain. And suddenly you're left wondering a question that many people quietly ask themselves. If the connection felt real, why didn't it last? Today I want to talk about something that often sits underneath those experiences. Not chemistry, not timing, but something a little deeper. Emotional readiness. Because sometimes the hardest truth to accept in relationships is this. Someone can feel a connection with you and still not be ready for the kind of love that you offer. Welcome back to the Life by Design podcast. I'm Angela Weiss, a nurse practitioner, author, and founder of the Life by Design Press. Each week here we will talk about mental health, relationships, faith, healing, and the quiet work of becoming who you were created to be. Whether you are navigating burnout, rebuilding after loss, learning to love without losing yourself, or simply trying to live with more peace and intention, you are welcome here. So, grab a cup of coffee, get cozy, take a breath, and let's begin. Before we get too far into today's conversation, I want to say something that feels important. This podcast isn't meant to be perfectly polished. I am not a polished person. Sometimes life is a little messy, and sometimes it's a lot messy, and honestly, I think that's okay. So every now and then you might hear me stumble over a word or a sentence. A dog might bark. One of my cats might wander into the room or want to be on the screen. Some days I might record outside because it's a beautiful day and you might hear the neighbors passing in the background. I might pause for a sip of water or coffee or take a moment to gather my thoughts before finishing a sentence. And all of that is okay because that's real life. This podcast is meant to feel more like a conversation between friends than a production. Life is rarely perfectly edited, and honestly, it's never perfect, and neither are we. Last Tuesday, we talked about something I call the waiting room. Those seasons of life where things feel a little uncertain, where you're between what used to be and whatever is coming next. After a relationship ends, burnout, after disappointment, after loss. Sometimes people believe the waiting room means life has paused. But the truth is, the waiting room is rarely empty. It's often a place where healing happens quietly. where identity rebuilds itself, where we begin asking deeper questions about the kind of life we want to build moving forward. And this past Sunday on the faith episode, we talked about something very similar, faith in the waiting. How sometimes the seasons where God feels quiet are actually seasons where preparation is happening beneath the surface. Waiting seasons often reveal patterns we hadn't fully noticed before, especially in our relationships. Which brings us to today's conversation. Connection and capacity are not the same thing. Someone can feel a connection with you. They can enjoy your presence. They can care about you deeply. They can feel drawn to you. But connection alone does not determine whether someone has the capacity to sustain a healthy relationship. Emotional capacity includes things like consistency, accountability, communication during discomfort, the ability to stay present when emotions get complicated or messy, the willingness to repair misunderstandings instead of withdrawing, instead of shutting down, instead of leaving. Many people want connection, but fewer people are prepared for the responsibility of maintaining it. Before we go any further, I want to pause for a moment and say to you, if you've ever experienced this kind of relationship, if you've ever found yourself lying awake at night, replaying conversations in your mind, wondering what changed, wondering if you did something wrong, what that was, wondering why something that felt so promising suddenly felt so uncertain. You're not alone. I hear versions of that story from people all the time. And often the answer isn't that you misunderstood the connection. The connection did exist, but their readiness did not. Chemistry can be very misleading. It can be very powerful, immediate, exciting, sometimes even rare. But chemistry does not tell us whether someone has the emotional maturity required for long-term connection. Relationships don't succeed simply because two people felt something for one another. They succeed because two people were ready to sustain something. And readiness involves things many people were never taught. How to stay emotionally present during conflict. How to communicate honestly without shutting down. How to tolerate vulnerability. How to take responsibility for their impact on someone else. Without those abilities, even genuine affection can collapse under pressure. A pattern that I hear often is, one of the things that shaped my understanding of this comes directly from conversations I've had with patients over the years. Someone will describe a relationship that began very quickly. They met someone who felt incredibly engaging right away. They texted constantly. They talked late into the night, sometimes for hours. They shared very personal stories early in the connection. It felt intense, meaningful, almost like they'd known each other for much longer than they actually had. And for a while, everything felt exciting. But then something slowly began to shift. Texts became less frequent. Plans became less certain. The emotional closeness that existed early on became harder to access. And the person sitting in front of me often says something like, "I don't understand what changed." But when we step back and look at the pattern together, something interesting appears. Sometimes the early intensity wasn't emotional readiness. It was emotional acceleration. Acceleration can feel like intimacy in the beginning, but they are not the same thing. Real intimacy develops gradually. It grows through consistency, through trust, through showing up over time. Acceleration often moves faster than someone's emotional capacity can sustain. Another pattern that I see often, especially among thoughtful, capable people, is that they stay in confusing relationships longer than they should. Not because they're naive, but because they're hopeful, empathetic, understanding. They can see the good in someone. They see the potential. But sometimes those same strengths make it harder to accept when someone simply isn't ready. Strong people often believe, if I'm patient enough, if I communicate clearly enough, if I really love them well, if I love good enough, eventually this will get better and things will stabilize. But emotional readiness is not something we can create for someone else. It's something each person has to develop for themselves. Something else worth mentioning, especially because last Thursday's mini mental health episode about burnout has been the most listened to episode so far, is that our nervous system plays a role in how we experience relationships. When someone grows up with emotional inconsistency or unpredictability, the nervous system can begin associating intensity with connection. Fast emotional escalation can feel exciting, exhilarating, almost magnetic. But excitement and safety are not the same thing. Emotionally healthy relationships often feel calmer, steadier, more predictable. And sometimes people initially say something interesting when they encounter that kind of relationship. They say, "I don't feel the same excitement like I have in the past." But what they're often experiencing is not boredom, it's emotional safety. Learning to recognize the difference between intensity and safety can completely change the way someone approaches relationships. Healthy love requires two ready people. Healthy love requires mutual readiness, not perfect people, but people who are willing to stay present when the relationship becomes complex, people who communicate instead of disappearing, people who repair misunderstandings, people who understand that love is not only a feeling, it's a practice. It's showing up again and again without leaving. If the idea of the waiting room resonates with you, that season where life feels uncertain but growth is still quietly happening, I created something simple that might help you. It's called the Waiting Room Reflection Packet. If you'd like a copy, email me at angela@lifebydesignpress.org and put waiting room in the subject line, and I'll send it to you. Again, that's angela@lifebydesignpress.org, waiting room in the subject line, and I'll send it to you. And if you'd like to explore the idea of waiting seasons more deeply, I wrote a book called The Waiting Room. It's available on Amazon. I'm showing it here. For those of you who don't see the video, it is in the video. I think it's a good book. You should get it. Before we finish today, I want to leave you with a couple questions to sit with. Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than was healthy because you believed someone might eventually become ready? What would it look like to value emotional capacity as much as emotional connection? And how might your relationships change if you began recognizing readiness earlier instead of hoping it would appear later? Okay, that wasn't a couple, that was 3. So what's coming up looking forward? Last Thursday's mini mental health episode about burnout has been the most listened to episode so far. So this Thursday, we'll stay in that conversation and talk about the quiet signs your nervous system may still be in burnout, even when life looks fine on the outside. And this Sunday, we'll continue the faith conversation about trusting God in seasons of waiting. Before we finish today, I want to gently remind you that this podcast is for education and reflection only. Listening does not create a therapeutic or provider relationship with me and is not a substitute for individualized medical or mental health care. If you are struggling or feel unsafe, please reach out for support. In the United States, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or 911. Call 911 in an emergency. Wherever you're listening today, whether you're driving or walking or folding laundry or painting your house or doing drywall, hanging drywall, working on your car, or just sitting quietly for a moment, I hope you feel a little less alone. If this conversation helped you, consider sharing this episode with someone who also might need it. And remember that healing rarely happens all at once. In fact, it grows quietly, slowly, through small choices made with intention. Take what you need, leave what you don't, and keep living your life by design. Until next time, take a breath, take care of your heart, keep building your life with intention, one small choice at a time. And thank you so much for choosing to spend this last nearly 20 minutes of your life with me. It means so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day.